it's very interesting to see if I make a video that is specifically talking about maybe a promotion that Mercedes-Benz has on one model and the videos take off. So one of the videos that I did was C63 AMGs, where Mercedes-Benz released a program at the beginning of a month. Turned out that it was a mistake. They got it handled very quickly, but I think it was because I put a video out about it. And as it was told to me, the nationwide surge on interest in C63 AMGs went 100 times that day, to the point that Mercedes-Benz Financial was like, hey, where are all these submissions coming from on C63s?
Today, I'm joined by Doug Horner, General Manager of North Olmsted Mercedes-Benz and the mastermind behind the wildly popular Benzs and Bowties social media accounts. We dive into why he intentionally leaves $50,000 on the table with every G Wagon he sells, plus how content creation transformed his dealership, now driving nearly half of his leads from social media. A big thank you to our sponsors for making today's episode possible: Open Lane, Auto Hauler Exchange, and CDG Recruiting. And now let's get into the show. Doug Horner on the CDG podcast. Doug, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Yossi. I'm glad to be here.
Finally got the bow tie on the podcast. Finally made it happen.
That's right. I had to wear it for you.
So for those that don't know, you're quite the social media phenomenon, to say the least. And I would say your shtick is that you wear bow ties every single day. Most people are listening to this right now, so they don't see your bow tie, but I see it. And can you just tell us a little bit about that? Like, how did the bow tie get started? Give us the scoop.
Yeah. So the bow tie goes back a little over 10 years now. 2014, I had to learn to tie one to be in a good friend's wedding. You know, they picked bow ties for their wedding party, the tuxes, and so I figured out how to tie it. And after that, I just thought to myself, maybe I'll just start wearing these every day. I was a salesperson at the time, and I was thinking, what would be another way that I could stand out and be memorable in case anybody ever forgot my name? So I just decided I'm going to start wearing bow ties, and it just stuck.
Dude, that's just such a good visual cue, because you're right. It's very differentiated. I remember early on, I had a mentor who just told me, said, Yossi, he said, just smile. And I had no tools in my arsenal. Like, I didn't know how to sell, and I had my personality, but I was very young. And so I'd meet customers and I would just be cheesing, like, just, hey, how are you? Now it was an authentic, real smile, but I would be smiling. Like, I would tell myself, doesn't matter what's going on. I'm putting a smile on. And it really had an impact, because when you smile at someone, and you know this, right? But like, when you smile at someone, they just naturally smile back. It says, like, you can't help it. It's It's amazing.
And I will say that when I started wearing the bow ties, I look back and I think part of that was me not fully understanding the art of car sales yet. I thought to myself, I didn't really understand that really, really great follow-up and being super memorable and present throughout the transaction will make it easier for people to remember your name. Because at that point I was so I was younger, hey, just get the car sold, right? And then my follow-up was definitely not what it needed to be. So I look back now and I think, well, I'm glad I did it, because people definitely, in Ohio, I was in Columbus at the time, nobody's wearing bow ties. So I was the only person that potentially they had come across, maybe ever, wearing a bow tie, especially at a dealership. But I understand now that that's just a piece of it, right? There has to be more than just the bow tie, right? You've got to have a good personality. You've got to be memorable in other ways as well.
Definitely. So take us back. Just tell us a little bit about how you got into, you are the general sales manager at a Mercedes store, which I don't believe I've spoken with anyone from Mercedes recently. So this should be interesting. But take us back, right? How did you get here?
Yeah. So I went to Ohio State, and when I graduated, it was 2010, and the economy was still not in great shape, recovering from the housing crisis. There weren't a lot of jobs available. And I, like maybe many other college kids, wasn't entirely sure what my future looked like. Sales was appealing to me, but I wanted to sell something that people wanted and not something that people need. So I kind of crossed financial services and insurance off my list. So I originally moved back to Cleveland, that's where I'm from, got a job at a Ford store. We were a big Ford family growing up, and so that just seemed like a natural fit for me. And after about 3 months, I kind of fell in love with the business, but I decided two things at the same time. I wanted to go back to Columbus because at the time, all my friends were still in Columbus. There wasn't really anybody here. And I wanted to work for Mercedes-Benz specifically. That was the brand. I wanted luxury, and to me, that is the brand that stood out as sort of the pinnacle of luxury without going to like Bentley or Rolls-Royce or something like that. So I reached out to a Mercedes store in Columbus and was fortunate enough to get an immediate email. Brian Brian Kramer was the GM of that store at the time.
Brian Kramer, look at that. What a
Right,
small
I
world.
know. So it's funny how my path is intertwined with him several times. But he sent me one of those online personality tests. I filled it out. Apparently that went well enough to get me brought in for an interview. And next thing I knew, I was a salesperson at Mercedes-Benz in Columbus, Ohio. So from there, fast forward, I was in sales for about 5 years. I was ready to take on a management opportunity, so I left and took a job as a sales manager for a Porsche store, also in Columbus. And then I was only there for about 9 months before the opportunity to move back to Cleveland and come to Mercedes-Benz in North Olmsted opened up. And for those that aren't familiar with Mercedes-Benz in North Olmsted, it's one of the largest dealerships in the Midwest for luxury car sales. North Olmsted, Ohio, of all places. It was a great excuse to move back home, be close to family, take this amazing opportunity, and that was in 2016. So almost 9 years later, here we are.
Incredible. Now, a couple questions there. If you were in the same position today, graduating out of college, would you still gravitate towards Mercedes? Like roughly a decade later, a little bit more, really. How would you feel today?
Yeah, I think Mercedes was naturally appealing to me for a lot of reasons. I mean, one, there's very few brands in the world that I think have kind of the star power, of Mercedes-Benz, right? I would tell people, oh, I work for Mercedes, and immediately people would be like, oh, like they would just kind of light up, like just hearing the word was intriguing to people, which I kind of liked, it felt different than saying I'm a car salesman, right? Which when a lot of people hear that, maybe they have an immediately negative connotation. But I love how not only is the brand super aspirational, but they have such a diverse model portfolio that there really is something for everyone with this brand. And I like that about it. Whereas maybe Porsche, which might be my second favorite brand, there's not that many models to choose from.
When you say lots of different models, what are you referring to specifically? How do you feel about, because what I want to get to is just how do you feel about the EV strategy at Mercedes?
Yeah, so I'll start by saying that we probably have too many different models. I mean, we've got everything from convertibles, coupes, to sedans, hatches, SUVs, wagons. I mean, just about every model class you could think of outside of a traditional minivan and a pickup truck, which do exist in other parts of the world, just not here. We've got just about everything. So, and all at different price points. I mean, you've got cars that start in the $45,000 range all the way up to, $250,000. So it's almost impossible for there not to be an option that would work for most car buyers. Now, for the EV strategy, I think that being an EQS 450 driver myself, that's the demo I have chosen over and over again over the last several years. The styling definitely a little bit polarizing. There's no doubt about it. I think that the feedback I've gotten from Mercedes is that they hear consumers and that they want a vehicle that looks more like the rest of, the traditional ICE vehicles. But the fit and finish, the technology, the ride quality of those cars. I mean, I drove one just to check it out and get familiar with it, and I haven't stopped driving them since. So I think they nailed it with the product itself. But of course, Americans are still pretty hesitant to get on board with EVs outside of Tesla. So
Tell us more about just your in-store demand. I've been thinking a lot about this, right? Are you attracting a younger customer, right? A millennial in their 30s that has, decent disposable income, can afford many different luxury cars. Are you attracting that customer? Are they going to BMW? Are they going to Tesla, right? Or are you noticing that your client base is aging? How do you, where are we at?
Yeah, interestingly, I would say that the average EV driver for us is definitely older. So if they're going for kind of the younger crowd, I'm not sure that that's working the way they want it to. I mean, do we have some younger people that buy the EVs? Absolutely. But really, it's either kind of the typical Mercedes-Benz driver that maybe they don't do a ton of driving anymore and they're comfortable with the idea of having an EV, or you've got just, I would say everybody else kind of falls into the category of maybe having some crazy negative equity situation that they're dealing with, and the discounts and the rebates and all the incentives that are available on EVs are sort of their only way out. You've kind of got, those are like the two different buyer types that we see most frequently with the EVs.
What would you say is the most different about running a Mercedes dealership? I know you've been part of several others, so you should be able to have some comparison there. But in general, give us a little inside scoop for what is different about how you conduct your operations, whether it be the sales process, the servicing, I don't know what, but I'm curious your thoughts there.
Yeah, so I think that with Mercedes, you have to be hyper aware of the brand and the expectations that people have before they come in. I think that human beings in life are so, everything relates around expectations in some way. If we have low expectations, then they're easily exceeded, right? If we have high expectations, then we could very easily fall short. So, I think different brands, no fault of their own, but they just have different expectations. So if you're going into a domestic brand, maybe you expect that you're going to have the typical car dealership type experience. When you're going into a Mercedes store, a lot more people are expecting that it's going to be a luxury experience. So product knowledge is hugely important. A defined sales process that your team follows every time over and over again.
That's a great point. Product knowledge.
Yeah, product knowledge is absolutely paramount, because if you don't know what you're talking about, I think we can all agree, people are looking for a reason not to trust car dealerships. I believe that, right? They might go in with best intentions, but if they feel like they're starting to get bad information, or they're talking to somebody that either doesn't know what they're talking about or is outright lying, or not maybe lying, but just like guessing, then the trust is gone right away. So, and that starts with product knowledge. If you don't know your product, people are going to sniff that out a mile away. So it's really just all about expectations. You have to exceed them, but you have to understand that, hey, this is Mercedes-Benz. We've got to be on our A game. We've got to look the part. We've got to be welcoming. We've got to be efficient, and we've got to give them the experience that comes with this amazing product.
So, and how are you trading, right? Whether it be product knowledge or other things? Because look, I think we can all agree that product knowledge is probably less important with a cheaper car. It just is,
sure.
Right? If someone is just, needs a car point A to B, is looking to kind of fit into a specific monthly payment, manage a budget, I'm not saying it's not important, but it's less important. So how are you training your team to kind of, and demanding this culture of excellence at your dealership?
So we train every day. I mean, we're closed on Sundays, but we have 6, sales meetings a week, right? Monday through Saturday, 9 a.m. we get together as an entire dealership, sales, product experts, we call them our delivery specialists, and then the BDC department. We all get together every morning and we train on all kinds of different things. Sometimes it'll be more state of the union, what's going on in the industry as a whole. What are we seeing with interest rates? What's the economy doing? Sometimes it'll be objection handling. Other times it'll be role playing and reviewing our sales process. But if you were to go inside of our conference room where we have these meetings, you're going to see several big poster boards on the wall. One of them has our vision statement, which is our vision statement for the dealership. It's kind of who we are and what we strive for every day.
And what is that vision statement?
The vision statement is, the way it reads is, a place of surprise and delight where world-class engaged team members, regardless of their role, take complete responsibility for our clients' experience with the goal of creating lifelong positive memories. Mm-hmm. So we approach it like we want people to leave thinking that was the best car buying experience I've ever had. And that can't be done just by the sales department, right? The porters, the delivery specialists, the BDC, we all have to be on the same page to accomplish that. So we've got that, we've got our 6-step sales process, and then we've got our sales commandments. So we have sales commandments that are just kind of a fun way to remind us on the things that are super important to providing a good experience. The very first one is thou shalt have fun, because if we're not going to have fun at work, then we can't expect our clients to have fun when they come in. And the very last one is do what you say you will do, right? If you tell somebody you're going to do something, you need to do it, because broken promises to our consumers are the quickest way for us to lose that trust that we work so hard to build.
That's strong. Tell me more about, you mentioned in the beginning how you're one of the most prominent Mercedes dealers in the Midwest. And I started thinking about your vision statement, right? Creating these lifelong memories and putting it all together. How do you feel about customer retention and combining that with customers that are maybe out of your market? I also think about the G Wagon mania that we went through a couple years back and people buying them all over the country. So just give us the whole kind of inside scoop on your take on customer retention, right? In order to create that experience that you just mentioned, I feel like the customer has to be there for that. That's a very important, unique experience, which will result in likely a lifelong customer. Kind of hard to do when they're not at your dealership and won't remain a customer, and kind of hard to do when it's someone that just wants a G Wagon and lives in California or Florida and asks to ship it. So how do you feel about all that?
Yeah, so we think about that every day. And it was funny to me when I was in Columbus, and you get your monthly sales rankings, and, we think we're doing reasonably well down there. And then we see, hey, this store up in Cleveland, Ohio is doing these like crazy numbers. How is it that they're doing that? And so part of the appeal to taking that job was I got to get in on the inside and figure out what they're doing there. And one of the biggest things was there was so much out-of-state business they were doing, but it wasn't just one-offs. It was people that were buying cars over and over again from out of state.
Interesting.
And then sending their friends and their neighbors. And so to do that, obviously your pricing always has to be competitive, right? People are not going to wildly overpay to do business out of state, but if you can make it incredibly easy for them and they never have to visit the dealership, there's a lot of appeal to for people to do that, especially if you're maybe a business owner, your time is limited, right? To know that, hey, my new Mercedes-Benz is going to get dropped off in my driveway, and yeah, the dealer's in Ohio and I'm in Florida, but who cares, right? I mean, they made it easy. I got a good deal. I don't have to lift a finger. We really focus on that. We know that in order to be a volume dealer, we're not going to only be able to sell in our backyard, but we definitely play the long game. And you brought up the G Wagons, and I love them and I hate them all at the same time, right? Because they get redesigned for model year 2019. The mania begins. We thought, like any other newly redesigned car, that'll eventually fade away, right? But here we are 6 model years later, and pre-COVID, during COVID, after COVID, nothing has changed with those trucks. I mean, the demand is still outrageous relative to the supply. It's just, Yossi, on G63 specifically, I probably get 10 to 15 people a day either reaching out directly or referrals that are desperately wanting one. And that's just me. That's not, never mind what's happening with the sales team. So I joke with people, if I actually kept a running list of every request I had for one, it would probably take me 30 years to fulfill it. It just wouldn't be possible. So that has left us with 2 options, right? You can do what most dealers do and sell them to the market, which, as most people know, is somewhere well north of MSRP, or you can define a process that will ideally net you a long-term client, which is what we've chosen to do. So we sell them for MSRP, but we have a very defined process where you need to be a client of the store, and if you're a previous G Wagon owner from us, you've bought a G Wagon from us and you're going to trade it back to us, then you move to the front of the list. And what that has done is helped us to identify people that want a long-term relationship.
This episode is brought to you by OpenLane, the leading online dealer marketplace for used cars. OpenLane brings more than 25 years of innovation to the wholesale automotive industry, solely focused on making wholesale easy so dealers can be more successful. Their marketplace offers a fast and transparent way to source used and fresh vehicle inventory. Looking to sell? On OpenLane, you can turn vehicles into more cash fast. With a nationwide network of buyers, vehicles listed on OpenLane sell in less than a day on average. OpenLane is the industry leader in innovation, rolling out new tools to make buying and selling easier. Visual Boost AI leverages the power of AI to help buyers review vehicles quickly and bid with confidence. New to OpenLane? Sign up now and new sellers receive a $2,500 sale fee credit. Learn more at openlane.com or click the link in the show notes below.
So, right?
Wait, when you say we sell them at MSRP, if you're a client of the store, does that mean you're a previous client of the store?
Yeah. So essentially, what we're doing is that there's kind of 2 criteria. Number 1 is you're a client of the store, right? That moves you to the front of the list. And then who jumps you is a client of the store who has previously bought a G Wagon from us and is trading that back to us.
Wow.
Because we see that as a sign of, we are committed to providing you access to the inventory that you just can't get, and you in return are giving us a nice used car that we can resell and recoup the money that we're, as I joke, lighting on fire every time we sell a G63 for MSRP.
And how much are you lighting on fire right now when you're selling them at MSRP? How much are you leaving on the table?
Easily $50,000 a car.
Wow. And who made that decision at the company to sell these for MSRP? I think this is an important point because, we always hear about the dealer that sold that car for so much over MSRP and the customer and whatever. But I think what you bring up right now, that's a very, strong counterpoint that you've actually said, hey, we want to run our business in a certain way. But we can also find, a method that works for both parties where you bring me a trade, you get it, you go to the front of the line, right? You are a previous client, you pay MSRP. So whose idea was that?
We kind of sat down and collectively came up with, the management team decided, how do we, because it's a unique problem to have. If you've got, 10 to 15 people a day trying to reach out for something that is an extremely short supply, you have to determine how you want to handle it, because it's just the problem has never gone away. And we figured it's better for everybody. We could play the short game, which is sell these cars for the market value and we all make a bunch of money, and then we, as you said, never hear from that person again, right? Or we can define a process that will encourage loyalty to the store, and in exchange for that loyalty, we will give you, a fair market price on what you're trading to us. We'll give you a way below market price on the car you're buying. And if we continue that kind of reciprocity back and forth, then you're just always going to have access to the inventory that most people are either paying huge money to get or just can't get. So, we figured that's just the better way. And
that's powerful.
Our Porsche store now has the same mentality for the GT cars, which have the same problem, right? What do you do with, you got 100 buyers for a GT3 RS for every one car you have.
And how many G63s are you selling roughly per month?
So we get, let's call it maybe 5 a month. That's probably the average.
Would it be fair to say that you're leaving $3 million on the table each year?
That's fair to say. That's fair to say. Now,
or I should say you're by the trade, which I was going to ask if you're stealing these trades, but you said you're putting a fair number on them.
Yeah, no, it's not one of those things where we're going to give you way below market value for your trade.
I got to ask. We all know the tricks.
Right? A lot of people ask us that. They're like, oh, well, you must be stealing the trade then. It's like, no, look, we're not going to wildly overpay for it, but it's going to be a defensible market-based number that we give you for it. So,
and then how are you, okay, different question. What vehicles are most in demand after G63, if any?
So after, the GLE model class. So GLC is kind of the number one seller now for Mercedes-Benz, at least in the States. SUVs every year become more popular and sedans become less popular. So GLCs always have great demand, the GLC 300 specifically, but it also is a, relatively, it's a core model, so there's good supply on it. And then after that, GLE would be, kind of the next most popular car, and GLEs sell very well. There's all kinds of fun variants, GLE coupes do very, very well. And then GLC coupes, right? So the coupe SUVs are low supply, high demand relative to the regular.
Can someone from Mercedes who's listening to this fix the whole GL this, GL that? I've lost track. So if they can simplify this for me, please, just give me one G and the rest give me a different letter. I've completely lost track. I'll be completely honest with you. Yeah. So I guess that's some form of a market feedback, because if I lost track, I can only imagine some customers probably lost track.
We get it all the time. Yeah, it's a lot of models.
Yeah, all these G's and this and that, just simplify that, please. Well, I want to go back to one thing you said though, which is, so you've leaned into these potentially out-of-state deals, call them, but you're still focusing on creating relationships by getting, their relatives, their friends, right? Being that go-to source, I can get you that car from wherever in the country. Great. My question to you though is, how are you actually delighting these customers? What is your sales process for these out of market deals, right? Because again, I'm tying it back to your vision statement. You're trying to delight these customers and create an experience that's memorable for them to bring other people. So how did you make this process into something that's so seamless that they say, wow, I will go back and shop at this dealer that's a couple states away from me because it was that great? What's your strategy?
For us, it's all about speed, efficiency, and making it as frictionless as possible. So we understand that a lot of people have had horror story experiences going into dealerships, or even just calling into a store and trying to get numbers. Social media has opened me up to more and more people sharing their stories with me on how sometimes you would think just calling a dealership and asking for a price would be an easy thing to do, and it's just not, right? Dealerships will make it very difficult sometimes, or they'll refuse to give numbers to people that won't come into the store. So the way we really focus on it and prioritize is that we tell people, look, if you don't want to come here and meet us in person and come visit the dealership, no problem. That's not a requirement. Not only are you going to get a price immediately, you'll get a trade appraisal without having to bring the car here. Obviously, we're going to do our due diligence and ask you questions, get pictures, etc. But there will be no roadblocks. We are also we're going to give you our best price up front. That's a big thing for us. We didn't always do that, but we've switched to that. We've always been very competitive, but we decided in order to really make this easy, it has to be a pre-negotiated price up front, whether that's a new car or a used car. I think a lot of dealers were doing that on used cars for a long time because used cars are so market-based. They're like homes. They're irreplaceable. They're all unique in some way. Even with new cars, one of my primary roles is every month, and sometimes multiple times a month, I'm looking at the market. I'm looking at my inventory and figuring out where these cars are transacting, and then I'm undercutting that market so that within a minute of you and I meeting each other, I can give you a price on any new car in our inventory. It's already pre-negotiated, and it's going to be a very good price that you don't have to work for. You don't have to beat me up for it. And you can't possibly pay more than somebody else, which I think most people, their biggest fear is actually, I just don't want to pay more than somebody else is paying.
I agree with that. And how are you doing your research? What's your method?
So it's a combination of, we're using sites like TrueCar and vAuto, and we're just collecting registration data, and we're getting as much transactional data as we can, third-party data that shows us what's a fair deal on these cars, where are they selling, and we're looking at day supply of our new car inventory. How many do other dealers have versus us? So if we realize that maybe the day supply on a GLE 350 nationwide is 30 days, and we have a 65-day supply, that we probably need to price them even more aggressively to get back in line with what the rest of the nation is currently doing. So it's a variety of things. But and sometimes it's just observational. I know that if we sell out of a model almost immediately and have nobody's ever giving any resistance whatsoever, then it probably was priced even too aggressively. Or if people are reaching out constantly on the same model and nobody's moving forward, then we probably somehow missed some data somewhere and that we're just priced incorrectly. So it's just a constant looking at all sources and really monitoring the new car inventory to make sure we're selling cars quickly.
Talk to me more about the actual buying experience. I've spoken a lot about, online car buying, omni-channel and all that. Your customer, do they actually want to do anything online? Or I would say, do they want to do more than the average person or less? And my personal hunch is if I am making discretionary kind of luxury purchase, I probably want someone to do most of the work for me. And I don't want to start, squibbling with some tool online. Listen, every customer or every person, human being, wants to know some information about their purchase before, being in front of a human. Or I think there's obviously it's human nature. We want to be in control. And I'm not suggesting that, I'm buying a Mercedes, I don't care about shopping online beforehand. My hypothesis is just that it might just be a little bit less desirable because I, want this more kind of white glove service. So that's my question to you. What's your take on online car buying, not remote, but literally, the customer doing things online versus just coming in store, do it for me, give me the answer right in front of me, make it painless. How do you think about that?
Yeah, that's the hot button topic of the last several years, isn't it? I think that there are more and more people that are comfortable handling a lot of the process online, but almost everyone at some point wants to get a human being involved to really fully understand what's going on, to make sure, hey, there's no hidden fees in here or any aftermarket items that I'm not, seeing. And they just want to know what are next steps. So I think that based on a lot of the questions that I get from time to time from people online that are very apprehensive about maybe buying a car out of state or remotely, I can tell that there is still a huge percentage of people that really haven't come around entirely to this concept of buying a car like you would buy something on Amazon. As much as dealers might want that, it just is a little scary to them. And they need somebody to talk to and ensure that, hey, if I have a problem or I don't know the answer to something or I don't know how something's going to go, I can pick up the phone and somebody's going to walk me through that. So yes, these digital retail tools, there are people that will go through the process there, but then what we find is that they'll often call into the store after they've been, messing around in there getting prices on cars. So I don't know that people are really ready to fully buy a car digitally just yet.
This episode is brought to you by Auto Hauler Exchange. Ship smarter, pay less, no middlemen. Auto Hauler Exchange connects dealers directly with haulers. The result, faster deliveries, lower cost, and zero broker hassle. Learn more by visiting autohaulerexchange.com. That's autohaulerexchange.com or clicking the link in the show notes below.
And so with your store, do you know roughly what's the penetration of online car buying, or do you track any of that stuff?
We do. I mean, again, this is where it gets very muddy is we have conversations all the time where if somebody begins their process in our online express store.
Doesn't mean it's online, yeah.
Right. And maybe they price out a couple different cars, they save a scenario or two, and then later that day they call into the store on the sales line and start talking to a salesperson, how do we really how do we determine what type of lead that really is? I mean, you can argue it both ways, where yes, they started on our website in the express store, but they didn't finish the process there. They called in with questions. So we do, I would say that we have probably 30 deals a month that we would consider to be digital sales, but you really could make the argument that they're somewhere between digital and a phone up, so to speak.
Yeah. So before we transition to arguably one of the most interesting things about you, which is your social media game, which is super strong. Sure. I mean, how many followers do you have on social media?
Probably 350,000, somewhere in there, somewhere in that neighborhood.
I mean, you've done an incredible job. Yeah, and I would say you've done something unique. Your social media game is that you do these. I mean, you can explain it better than I can, but it's not. Sure. I guess it's some form of a skit, but it's not really, because you actually just have a customer and you don't show the customer. You're showing yourself and kind of documenting the interaction. Yeah. So really neat. So let's talk about content. First of all, before we even get into nitty gritty, give us my nerdy question. Like, what's been the ROI of your social media presence and just you creating content online? What's been the ROI of that? Give me like anecdotally, whatever you can kind of share.
Yeah. So I started posting in July. That was when the regular posts started going up of last year. So the first thing that we did
July
was
2024?
2024. Yeah.
Okay.
So started, looked at leads and, internet leads and phone calls that came into the store from January to June, and then from July through the end of the year. And there was nearly an 80% increase in just inbound leads from internet and phones. And many of them were attributed to the social media presence, right? They're either directly mentioning one of the social medias or they're mentioning mine. We basically created a landing page on our website to say, work with Doug Horner, so that when people, if they go there, we know kind of that they got pointed there from one of my social media pages. And, just the numbers to our website have exploded. I mean, they're up well over 100% since since we started posting those videos. So just the attention and the eyeballs on the store is more than double easily what it was prior. So it's just been incredible. Now sales have started ticking up incrementally, but what happened is when you basically double your leads overnight without doubling your team, now you've got to kind of reinvent your process in the store, which we've had to do several times because we didn't massively increase the number of people that we have on our sales team, but all of a sudden there's twice as many people reaching out.
What would happen to this? Like, I'm trying to understand how big of an impact you've had. What would happen, do you think, today to the store's leads if you just turned off the spigot? If you just disappeared, you didn't do it anymore, you got deplatformed, I mean, whatever. What would happen to the leads?
I'm sure it wouldn't happen overnight, but I think that gradually you would see them start to fall off again. And
how much?
Probably by, close to half if we were to expect them to return back to the numbers that they were at. Yeah, it's wild. And especially it's very interesting to see if I make a video that is specifically talking about maybe a promotion that Mercedes-Benz has on one model and the videos take off. So one of the videos that I did was on C63 AMGs, where Mercedes-Benz released a program at the beginning of a month. Turned out that it was a mistake. They got it handled very quickly, but I think it was because I put a video out about it. And as it was told to me, the nationwide surge on interest in C63 AMGs went 100 times that day, to the point that Mercedes-Benz Financial was like, hey, where are all these submissions coming from on C63s? So it's it's amazing how quickly the impact can be when you reach an audience. And I once we got a G63 4x4 pretty unexpectedly. It was sort of a bonus car that we earned. I made a video about that, and to say that our phones exploded for 3 straight days, the phone didn't stop ringing. It was insane.
Did you ever do any social media before you started documenting your sales process?
No, I had all the social medias. I didn't use them hardly at all. So
that's incredible.
That was kind of the funny thing for me, is that I wasn't really a big consumer of social media, but now here I am.
Yeah. And tell us a little bit about your process, right? So how does it work? For anyone that is just dying to see what you do, just search on Google, Benzs and Bowties, on Instagram, on TikTok, wherever. Just search it on social media. You'll find this page right away. I'm on Instagram right now. You have 83,000 followers there. But can you just tell us a little bit about your process, right? I'm a customer at your store. I walk in. Do I suddenly see a camera just sitting there? How does that work?
Yeah, so there's essentially, I have one of those standing desks. So it has a couple of different levels to it.
Nice.
And on one of the levels of the standing desk at any time is going to be, I've got a DJI Osmo Pocket 3, and it's always perched there. And essentially the way it works is if a salesperson walks into my office, I just hit record and we see where it goes, right? We just see what the conversation's about. about. And so as I describe it to people, whereas maybe watching George Saliba is more of watching a live interaction with a client, you're sort of watching this movie unfold. My content is more, how did the movie get made, right? You're watching sort of the behind the scenes, what happens when your salesperson disappears into the sales manager's office. Like, what are they really talking about back there, right? That's what my content
I love that. Yeah, I never thought about it that way. By the way, I know you're working with Nomad's Cast right now because, well, the reason I know about that is because I hope you're cool with that. I'm sharing that, but I recently invested in Nomad's Cast.
Okay.
And so
they told me that they were partnering up with you. I got to meet Omar when I was down at NADA, and he came highly recommended by George, and so.
And what's he doing for you, Doug? What's Omar doing for you?
So what him and his team are doing is they're taking my content and they're rewatching it and finding kind of the relevant conversations in there that are in line with my my content strategy. And it was an absolute necessity for me, because the problem with my content versus like a Russ Flips Whips, which is, Russ is thinking out the idea for a little skit. He's writing out this, the plot, and then he's going and shooting it real quick. And it's maybe a minute and minute 30. I would get to the end of a day sometimes, and I'd come home with anywhere from 10 to 20 videos that were between 5 and 20 minutes long. And I'd have to sit down, rewatch them all, remember what was this conversation about? Do I think that would be a good fit for social media? It was just exhausting and very time consuming, because it's, again, people are walking in my office, I'm hitting record, and we see what happens, right? There really is no, occasionally I'll do a little skit, but most of it is just real life interactions at the dealership.
Yeah. I mean, dude, 50% of your leads, you're doing something right. Are you encouraging anyone on your team to do this as well, or is this just something that you do?
Yeah, so I've encouraged the team to get on board with it. A few of them have done that. There's really, some of them are doing it here and there. I've got one salesperson that does it pretty regularly, and he has, he's now a pretty equal contributor to the lead flow coming into the store, where people see him, they see me. We kind of have a little bit of a shtick together when we work deals, and so it's just created a lot of awareness. At this point, we kind of think my goal is, obviously I want to provide an amazing experience to people, but also how cool would it be if Mercedes-Benz of North Olmsted is the most known Mercedes-Benz dealership in the whole country, right?
Amazing.
So that's kind of what the idea is at this point.
This episode is brought to you by CDG Recruiting. The Car Dealership Guy platform has direct access to thousands of skilled professionals in the dealership and automotive industries. And so, building on top of our free industry job board, we've launched CDG Recruiting, a hands-on white glove automotive recruiting service. Whether you're looking to fill roles in dealership management, the C-suite, F&I, fixed ops, auto tech, or SaaS, we take the hassle out of hiring by doing the heavy lifting for you. It's easy. Start by submitting a confidential talent request on our website. Next, we connect you with a dedicated talent expert who will thoroughly understand your unique needs. And finally, we present you with top-notch candidates who are ready to drive your business forward. And here's the best part. We vet and screen every candidate for you so you don't have to. And with our placement guarantee, hiring through CDG Recruiting is 100% worry-free. Collectively, our team has decades of experience and has successfully placed over 1,000 roles in the automotive industry, so you know you're in good hands. If you're ready to find your next rockstar employee, try CDG Recruiting today by visiting cdgrecruiting.com or clicking the link in the show notes below. Again, that's cdgrecruiting.com.
So on that note, what is your vision with the social media and just media in general? Or do you have a vision, right? Is it just to continue growing the dealership? How do you think about it?
Yeah, that's a great question that I think about all the time. I don't necessarily have a roadmap on where I'm going with this. Part of me understands that the content is a result of me sitting in the chair I sit in and having these conversations with my sales team every day. So I think that the big vision, what made me want to stay in the car business to begin with, was this drive that I had to say, I can make buying a car better than most dealerships do, and I want people to change their mind about what it's like to buy a car. I feel like now I have the platform to help change people's mind on a much larger scale than I did. Because before it was like, I got to do that one-on-one every time I'm interacting with somebody. But now I can kind of tell people, hey, this is what it can look like. This is what we think it should look like. Here's what you might want to avoid if you're dealing with a dealer that's playing games with you and giving you a bad experience. So the ultimate goal is to make buying a car better for as many people as I possibly can.
It's amazing. Doug, I love what you're doing. Your content is great. It's really, you've done such a tremendous job. And I can tell you're on a tight ship, just, hearing you speak. So it seems like you're really running a great business. What's your outlook for the next, 3, 6, 9 months, industry, Mercedes in general? Just how do you feel right now about where business is going?
I'll be honest, I feel pretty uncertain. Every time I think that I have it figured out and I feel like I can see where things are going, we just keep getting wrenches thrown in the process. So, interest rates started to tick down. Now, in some cases, we're seeing them start to tick back up again. Incentives have gotten a lot better for most of our models, which is hugely important for us, because if Mercedes wants to win back market share that they lost, as many manufacturers did during COVID, you're going to have to incentivize people to come back to the brand. So, most days I'm pretty optimistic. Other days I'm just not sure. I mean, when people are lobbing questions at me about tariffs and interest rates, it's like, some days you're like, who knows really where we're heading. But I will say overall things have gotten a lot better, but the last couple of years have been a wild ride, and it's not always very clear where we're heading.
Touche. You're not the only one. I mean, I appreciate your honesty, because it's true. You're right. There has been so much change, and many people feel that way. I can tell you that. So, Doug Horner, any closing thoughts? Anything you want to ask me? Anything else in your mind? Or by the way, or anything I didn't ask you that I should have?
No, this has been wonderful. I thank you for having me on here. I think I told you very quickly when we chatted before NADA how thankful I am for your podcast and what you do, and just all of the amazing information that you've provided consumers. I mean, what a cool thing that you have built here. And I love the story of how you started, because I think that you and we share a similar goal in that we want to give more information to people and make maybe the car business a little less mystified and a little less scary. But yeah, it's just been so cool to see what you've done. And I have to say thank you for, particular interviews you did with Russ, you did with George, that were the kind of the final push that I needed to start making content, because I kept, seeing them do it and hearing their story was, to anybody that's ever thinking about making car content or content in any industry, you're always going to be able to find a million reasons to talk yourself out of doing it. Right? That's extremely easy to do. Either, I don't think I'll look good on camera, or it'll just be awkward, or I don't know what I'm going to say. If you just start doing it, eventually you probably are going to figure it out. And so listening to those podcasts were finally that, what, if Russ and George can do it, why can't I do it?
That's
and
exactly
now here we
it.
Are, right?
And you're amazing. How does your family feel about it? Your wife, or I guess your kids are young, you told me, but how do they feel about it?
My wife has been very supportive, thankfully, which I give her a lot of credit for that, because it's been a little weird for sure to go from me barely interacting with social media at all to it being a huge part of my life, right?
You're probably getting text messages from like friends that you haven't spoken with in like 10 years or something, or I can imagine.
All the time. And if we go out, we were out to dinner for Valentine's Day just this last weekend, and after dinner, we go out and grab a drink across the street at this bar, and like 5 people come up and say, "Oh, are you Benzs and Bowties?" Right? And somebody else sends a drink from across the bar, and so it's like, in some ways, it's kind of wild. And it's like, thank you for being so supportive of this, because it is in a lot of ways a little bit weird to sort of be like a B-list celebrity or a C-list celebrity, whatever you want to call it.
I call it a niche micro influencer.
Yes, there you go. I like that.
I love it.
So,
all right, Doug. Hey, man. Thanks for coming on the pod. This has been awesome. Appreciate you telling your story.
Thank you for having me, Yossi. This has been a real treat for me, and thank you for doing what you do. I appreciate you very much.
Brother.
All right. Hope you enjoyed that episode. Please give the podcast a rating, consider subscribing to the show, and check the show notes for links to what we talked about. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you guys next time.